Oh, good morning. We, live in a very challenging world, and it's not, um, you know, it's not unusual. Human beings have always been challenged, and human beings, uh, you know, despite the fact that we have so many wonderful tools to knowledge and science, uh, we have freedom of movement, sort of, a matter of speaking. But we are caught often by our own abilities. So so-called spiritual practice is often what we turn to free ourselves. And that freedom, that spiritual practice can also be a kind of trap, pitting our practice against what we think is an impediment. Zen practice, sort of promise, if you will, is to give us the tools to not get trapped by that. We kind of trap ourselves. There was a, were you at the class the last time we talked? Was that, were you at the introduction class on Tuesday? You weren't at that one, right? Well, that was Daisho and Matt, right? So there was a question by somebody who said, is this practice, what did they say, science of the mind? Is it a religion or a science of the mind? Trap number one. I think, we inherited this practice. Dogen Zenji, studying Dogen Zenji and studying the Lankavatara Sutra. The teachings, these teachings came from the Zazen masters, the meditation masters that moved north from India to Gandhara, Pakistan and Afghanistan. They brought with them the Dhyana Sutras, or those scriptures that emphasized wisdom, meditation, not technique. They didn't emphasize technique. They didn't actually teach a methodology for sitting. You don't, we do that now, but actually that was not the history of it at all. The teaching had more to do with what you do when you're not sitting, moving around, engaging. So in some sense, this is a kind of heuristic teaching. No, it's not a, it's an approach to a problem about using sort of self-discovery. It's awareness, practice of awareness. So they focused on mindfulness of breathing or awareness of breathing. They focused on so-called impurities. They were concerned more with the so-called impurities of the physical world. We look at, thinking the physical world is impure is a kind of impurity. And what loving kindness meditation was a part of that. Don't set up walls of the mind, as the Lankavatara Sutra and even Dogen. There's a lot of don't set up walls of the mind, don't set up separation. And of course, they also taught the 12-fold chain, like the ignorance leads to, a kind of consciousness of separation. And then we begin to divide body, mind, spirit. Very good for science. Very good for knowing how to cure illness. Very good to know how to engage as a community. But it's not the tool for awakening. So they taught, what do we, the mind that they're talking about is not the mind that's separate from the body, which is separate from activities in the world, livelihood, which is separate from spiritual practice and separate from political practice and so on. Aspects of the mind are as real as a cloud and about as easy to get a hold of. So we sit with everything, we say, sit with all beings. So, but they were very also, careful to identify what is it that makes a person who's free from delusion, what do they do? How do they act? So Dogen Zenji wrote this 8 awakenings of bodhisattvas, great beings, which we all are in his mind, but nobody is separate. We take the Precept class this week. One of the things we'll focus on is why do they have the same precepts for priests as lay people? Well, there'll be a lot of political reasons we'll study and the way in which the practice wove in and out of cultures. But the real cause of bodhisattva precepts that are the same for lay people and priests is that it's a bodhisattva path, not a lay path or a priest path. And we're all bodhisattvas, so it applies to everybody. What you do is up to you. So so what's the eight great awarenesses? And there's many versions, but I'm reading it from Enlightenment Unfolds by Kaz Tanahashi, edited by Kaz Tanahashi. So the first one, Buddha said, this is supposedly came from Buddha's last sermon, but I don't know. I've never been able to find this exact thing from Buddha's last sermon. But when they mean Buddha's last sermon, it could have meant something he spoke 10 years before or something. So the first one is about desires. It comes down to just knowing when you've had enough, how to be satisfied. My mother used to say, know when to say when. Enough. If we seek fame and gain from this practice, we will be exhausted. Don't desire too much. Just enough to keep yourself healthy, balanced, connected. Don't too much and you'll never be satisfied. Desire will rule your life. That's the engine of desire, as we said in that, will just keep running regardless of what's going on. So that kind of knowing your world and then knowing when is enough, kind of the first two. One is to be aware that, the other is actually to practice that. And the leads into what the third one. So the first one is be aware, understand the nature of desire. And then there is to enjoy your practice, enjoy your serenity. The definition of serenity is not the opposite of confusion or something. It means that your practice is not defined by something out there. It's defined by your own life. Look into a mirror and you see a reflection of Buddha. Not somebody who needs to climb the ladder of practice. The Dhyana masters were clear that anybody who practices the awareness, mindfulness, is equal to a Buddha. The fourth one is diligent effort. Light a fire under. Don't depend on anybody else. Don't define it by what's going on in your life. Define it as your life, good or bad. The fifth one is not to neglect insight. Neglectful in this case means that you tie your awakening to a specific activity or to a certain kind of person or a certain kind of society. We tie our awakening to others. So Dogen says, don't go out and look for it. Let it come to you as an example of mindfulness, example of enlightenment. You could still say, that's not the way I want to live. But that's your choice. What you're seeing is not something other than you. Just because we let things come to us, we're not going to eat a pound of butter every day. Just keep. So it's not without discernment, but it's not without characteristic judgment that creates walls of the mind. And he says here, and of course the sixth awakening is practice. Practice Zazen. We inherited some dhyana masters, not philosophers, not political scientists. We inherited from those who sat down under a tree in a monastery, or in our case, in the midst of our busy lives, and practiced Zazen. Zazen itself does not have a structure, breathing, posture. That's our entry, our door. We cannot look at it as a science of the mind because we're not trying to categorize or we're not trying to prove a hypothesis. And we cannot prove that this practice has any real benefit, although we know it does. If we did that, people would follow a recipe. There's no recipe. So, therefore, the seventh is to cultivate insight. Another word for meditation was tied to cultivation, not to sort of think meditation, but like what are the ingredients of the ground of your life that causes this practice to flower? And the eighth is not to be engaged in hollow discussions. And hollow discussions could be serious discussions about practice, but they don't go anywhere. Just makes sense. Studying the Lankavatara Sutra is meant to be a mirror of your own practice. Dogen's words are hard to understand because he's trying to use language to express what is not in sections or categories. It's not categorical. It's not a product of the Zen school. It's the result of insight, which doesn't belong to any school. And that, like the Eightfold Path, each each of these contain everything else. The less we engage in hollow discussions or discussions that are not conducive to helping somebody else wake up and ourselves wake up, then we're just creating more walls. This is not a rub against intellectual practice or people who write books about practice or instructions. It's, that's the ground of being, right? But we don't want to get caught in weeds and grasses, as they say. Don't get too wrapped up in what's underneath your feet. Just see the entire landscape. A person who has never read a book on Buddhism, who's never studied one word, can practice wholeheartedly. A person who's a scholar who teaches Buddhism at a university can also do the same, but they both have to see through their lives. And you're not going to do it through not knowing, and you're not going to do it through knowing. You're going to do it through seeing yourself. So that's why we're so, when we read Lankavatara Sutra, and there's a statement in the Lankavatara Sutra about the nature of mind, our immediate thinking is, I need to find what that is. Where is it? So the teacher said, oh, teacher, my mind is so confused. What do I do? He said, don't worry about it. Just bring me your mind. I'll help you out. I can't find it anywhere. I said, you're free. Well, that sounds kind of flippant, but it's actually quite serious. In practice, we are very free because everything that appears before us is an example or a manifestation of awakened nature. Not for everybody, not. But as my predecessor used to say, how many books do you have to read before you could ride a horse? When I was young, to learn how to swim, I went to a YMCA, I think it was, or something, and they explained to us a little bit about, going in the water, being safe, and so on, and this is what it's like. And they taught us, in the shallow water, how to do things. And then we dove into the deep, and completely different than what they explained to me. This is wet and cold and deep. So the lesson I received from the swimming teacher was, relax your body and you'll float. Stiffen up and you'll sink. So I learned to float. Kind of the first lesson in meditation. Don't try to meditate. Don't try to follow a script. And so this Gandhara, the way these dhyana masters went to, which was now Afghanistan and Pakistan, is probably where our practice was formulated as a kind of emphasis. The first Buddhist statues were carved there. This is where the monks traveled, continued to travel along the Silk Road. So they carried with them these meditation instructions that were not so much instructions as they were emphasized. Is it better to keep looking for a meditation technique, or you sit down and already everything you have is already there? Body, posture, thoughts, feelings. What's lacking? What more do you need? When we help others, we get into a kind of tricky. We're not discounting science. Many people now understand how the body and mind work together for the result of ending addiction, for instance, or post-traumatic stress, something like that. That's very important. But the dhyana masters were not really interested in that so much. We are, because we understand through science that practices like this have some benefit. But this room is not designed for that. Soto Zen is not designed for that. We have to be careful that we don't lead people to believe that we have some technique and method for them to achieve something. But we can give them all the space they need to wake up themselves. We can look to the teaching, the Eightfold Path and the Four Noble Truths and the 12-fold chain of causation, not as a philosophical discussion or even as an exact method, but the inspiration to understand that we already have the tools to open our eyes. But we have to do it ourselves. We have to sit. We have to understand that our actions and our words can help somebody or imprison them. Words are powerful. Actions are powerful. So without any care, we'll create, as you can see, chaos. There's no reason for our society to be so chaotic and so kind of against itself, like somebody fighting their own body. My hand fighting the other one. I'm right. Why? Left hand thinks it's better than the right hand. It's not. That's unnecessary, and it won't lead anywhere, except to more problems. So, in our own life, if we can know when to say when. Enough information, thank you. I don't need any more. I don't need any more headlines. I get it. Now I want to practice serenity, equanimity. And my diligent effort is not to separate, is to connect. If we don't make up our mind to do it, which is just what Buddhism is making up your mind. Nobody's born a Buddhist, as Okamura Roshi said it. Nobody is born into this practice. You know, we have the ability to open our eyes, but we have to open our eyes. So, study Dogen. Look at the Lankavatara Sutra. Not as an academic exercise, although you're free to do so, but where is it pointing? Where is it pointing? It's a roadmap. What's this roadmap when I put it in front of me? And how much do I really need to know? Well, you answer that question for yourself. Everybody's different. This practice is not to give us something more to think about or do. It's to validate our life as it is. Are you not already as real as a Buddha? Is there something lacking that we need to find? Did we lose our true nature somewhere? Where is it? Maybe page 250 will help me. Read freely, study freely, sit freely. It's your practice. And to help each other. We don't live, unfortunately, we don't live in a society that encourages that. It encourages division for success. I have something you don't, you have to. Nothing wrong with desire, just we employ it when we need it. I don't need to desire anything right I don't need to have no designs on becoming a Buddha, Dogen says. What does that have to do with sitting or lying down? Well, nothing and everything. How you sit, how you lie down, with awareness, with diligence, with loving kindness, insight. Don't be confused by our life. Fuse it. Put your life together with the teaching, and you'll have the Lankapara Sutra right in front of you. You just can't take a picture of it. Can't send a catalog to somebody. Diligent effort, when I was younger, diligent effort meant that above anything else that we did in that school was to make sure that everything you did, food, walking, clothing, supported Zazen. In this practice, everything we do is already Zazen, Mantra Zazen. They're both very valuable. We're not really trying to find an optimal solution to the problem of being human. Human nature is not something to be solved. It's a unique, miraculous experience that happens extremely rare. That's our good karma put us here. Why waste it on, as they say, a spark from a flintstone? Fortunes of life are like a dart of lightning, vanished in an instant, Dogen says. Please, honored followers of Zen, long accustomed to groping for the elephant, don't doubt the true dragon. Our life won't seem so distant from practice. We won't be so easily sold on something. But we can read freely. Thank you for writing this wonderful book. I'll read it. Okay. What did Alan Watts used to say? You're it is it, and that is that. It's too easy. We are the inheritors of a great tradition, and it looks just like our life. Don't be fooled by some other instruction. Enjoy this practice freely, and you'll be just like the dhyana masters.
To freedom, illusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. Buddha's way is unsurpassable. I vow to realize it.